In the Pokemon TCG, a majority of attacks only deal damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. However, many Pokemon and strategies have existed over the years that let you attack your opponent's bench Pokemon directly. Pokemon that can attack your opponent's bench are often better at disrupting your opponent's game plan. So whenever a good Pokemon that can damage the bench is printed, they're very strong. And there's many incredible cards to go over, so let's get right into it. Starting things off at number 10, we have Buzzwole GX. For 1 Fighting Energy, Jet Punch deals 30 damage to defending Pokemon, and 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Also, for 3 Fighting Energy, Knuckle Impact deals 160 damage, but you couldn't use the attack during your next turn. For this same energy cost, Absorption GX dealt 40 damage for each of your remaining prize cards. Once again, it's a combination of good traits which made Buzzwole GX fit well into the 2018 and early 2019 standard formats metagame. During the 2018 and early 2019 meta, evolution Pokemon were incredibly widespread. Oftentimes, the basic Pokemon these strong evolutions would evolve from had around 70 to 60 HP. Since players would often need multiple evolution Pokemon in play, early game Jet Punches could start picking away at low HP Pokemon for easy prize cards. The ease at which Buzzwole GX could KO evolving basics was so good that playing evolving basics with 70 HP over ones with 60 HP could be game determinative, as it would prevent unmodified Jet Punches from taking 2-hit KOs on bench Pokemon. If the evolving basic Pokemon was brought into the active spot with a card like Guzma or Lycanroc GX, Buzzwole GX decks had many ways to increase the attack's damage output for a 1-hit KO, while still attacking the bench for a 2-hit KO. Strong Energy and Diancie Prism Star each increased Buzzwole's damage by 20, and Beast Energy Prism Star increased it by 30. Even against high HP basic Pokemon like Rayquaza GX, early Jet Punch damage boost modifiers would set up KOs for later in the game. That's not to say all of Buzzwole GX's power was concentrated into Jet Punch. Many Buzzwole strategies sought to power up the Pokemon's Knuckle Impact attack as well through various means. During the 2018 standard format, Max Elixir could be used to attach Fighting Energy straight from your deck to a bench Buzzwole GX and allow the card to attack for high damage far sooner than it otherwise should. In the early 2019 format, Beast Ring allowed you to attach 2 basic energies from your deck to any Ultra Beast you wanted, as long as your opponent had exactly 3 or 4 prize cards remaining, a condition that will eventually come online as long as your opponent is trying to take KOs. With many ways to accelerate energy into Buzzwole GX, a player could easily convert its early game pressure from Jet Punch into KOs on high HP Pokemon. These aspects made Buzzwole GX a relevant part of the standard metagame the whole time the card was legal in the standard format. And at number 9, we have Rayquaza EX. For 1 electric and 1 colorless energy, Special Circuit dealt 30 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon, increased to 50 damage if that Pokemon had a Pokepower or Pokebody. Also for 2 electric and 2 colorless energy, Sky High Claws dealt 70 damage. While these attacks, especially the latter, aren't particularly standout, what makes them so strong is Rayquaza EX's Rage Aura Pokebody. As long as you had more prize cards remaining than your opponent, you could ignore all colorless energy costs and Rayquaza EX's attack costs. Rage Aura meant that any player taking a lead against a deck with Rayquaza EX had to be wary of Special Circuit dealing 50 damage to one of their Pokemon for a single energy, or Sky High Claw 70 damage, putting a dent in any active Pokemon for half its usual cost. If Special Circuit dealt 30 damage at all times, it would be a reasonable attack for a basic 2-price Pokemon to have at the time. Most of the time though, Special Circuit would deal 50 damage due to the prevalence of many strong Pokepowers and Pokebodies during the standard format at the time. When dealing 50 damage, Special Circuit became one of the best attacks you could possibly have. Having a basic Pokemon which could deal 50 damage to a wide array of Pokemon for only 2 energies was unheard of at the time. Many of the format's best 2-prize Pokemon, such as Absol EX and Mew EX, were each 2-hit KO'd by Special Circuit. Many evolution Pokemon weren't safe from the 2-hit KO either, with cards like Metagross and Jolteon EX each only having 100 HP. Ironically, Rayquaza EX was one of the few Pokemon with the Pokebody that avoided the 2-hit KO as it had 110 HP. When Special Circuit could be used for 2 energy, it was still a good attack. If you were behind on prize cards, Rage Aura made Special Circuit one of the best tools for coming back in a game. Special Circuit was also made even stronger by the fact that Rayquaza EX had no weakness, meaning it would usually be able to use multiple Special Circuits before getting eventually knocked out. Because of Special Circuit's very low attack costs, many decks were capable of using Rayquaza EX, and the card being a staple in toolbox strategies that wanted to have a card to handle every situation. It's one of these strategies that won the 2007 World Championship, with many other decks using Rayquaza EX in the top 32. And at number 8, we have Gengar. This Stage 2 Pokemon has an excellent Pokepower and 2 good attacks. Its Fainting Spell Pokepower made it so that whenever Gengar would be knocked out from an attack, you had to flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon would also be knocked out. For 1 Psychic Energy, Shadow Room puts 3 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. The Pokemon had a Poke Power, an old term used for certain abilities. Shadow Room put 6 damage counters on it instead. For 1 Psychic and 1 Colorless Energy, Poltergeist made your opponent reveal their hand, and the attack dealt 30 damage for each trainer, supporter, and stadium card your opponent had. Each part of this card was relevant towards its competitive success. It made Gengar an incredible threat during its time in the standard format. The main reason to consider playing Gengar was Shadow Room. Being able to do upwards of 60 damage to any Pokemon your opponent has in play made Shadow Room an incredibly efficient attack that could spread damage around your opponent's entire setup. Shadow Room's power was bolstered by the bevy of support Pokemon used in decks for their Pokepowers, like Uxie and Claydol. A wide variety of decks would play these 2 Pokemon for their Pokepowers that let players draw extra cards, something that Shadow Room could take advantage of. While the 6 damage counters would never one-hit KO these 2 Pokemon, Gengar decks often played at a slower pace and didn't rely on one-hit KOs. Shadow Room's versatility in being able to damage any Pokemon meant that no card was safe from a 2-hit KO if it had a Pokepower. Even outside of supported Pokemon, many of the format's premier offensive threats also had strong Pokepowers. Pokemon like Luxray G Lv.X and Gardevoir were 2 strong attacks that lined up poorly into Gengar because of this. While the prevalence of strong Pokepowers meant that Shadow Room was usually the main game plan, Gengar's other options meant that the card was never truly in bad situations where Shadow Room would only place 3 damage counters. A Poltergeist attack that dealt 120 damage by your opponent having 4 cards of the respective types in their hand was capable of knocking out many of the format's strongest Pokemon. Poltergeist was also made more reliable due to how the format of Gengar's times were played out. During the 2009 and 2010 standard formats, the 2 formats Gengar was legal play, players would often amass very large hand sizes due to Claydol constantly drawing up to 6 cards a turn, and resource engines like Cyrus's Conspiracy that slowly accumulated a lot of cards over multiple turns. On top of all of this, Fainting Spell gave Gengar a 50% chance to KO any Pokemon that KO'd it, something which made trading positively into a Gengar with your own Pokemon fairly difficult and often risky. All these aspects of the card came together to form a very strong disruptive Pokemon, and founded a strategy that would take top 16 of the 2009 World Championship and top 4 of the 2010 World Championship. And at number 7, we have Kyurem. This card is a Team Plasma Pokemon, a unique distinction given to certain cards, which meant they could take advantage of cards meant to benefit the Team Plasma archetype. This basic Pokemon was almost entirely relevant for its Frost Spear attack combined with its Team Plasma distinction. For 1 Water and 1 Colorless Energy, Frost Spear dealt 30 damage to the defending Pokemon and 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. While strong Pokemon like Landorus EX had the same attack with a lower energy cost, the Team Plasma distinction, as well as Kyurem being a single prize Pokemon, made the card one of the scariest attackers during the 2013 standard format. This stems from the fact that Team Plasma decks had both fantastic consistency and great tools for damage modulation. Setting up a turn 1 Kyurem was trivial thanks to 2013 standard format having no restrictions on what a player could do on their first turn in the game, combined with items made to support the Team Plasma archetype. Team Plasma Ball was an item card that lets you search your deck for any Team Plasma Pokemon and put it into your hand for no downside. And Colress Machine was an item card which lets you attach a Plasma Energy from your deck to any of your Team Plasma Pokemon, fulfilling Frostsphere's Colorless Energy requirement. Even without other damage modifiers, dealing 30 damage to both the active and bench Pokemon helps set up damage for stronger attackers like Lugia EX to take KOs later in the game. However, Kyurem would rarely deal only 30 damage to the active Pokemon. Deoxys EX was a Team Plasma Pokemon with the Power Connect ability. Power Connect boosted all damage dealt to the defending Pokemon by your team's Plasma Pokemon's attacks by 10. You could apply more than 1 Power Connect ability at a time, so having 3 Deoxys EX in play meant that Frost Spear would deal 60 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. But that's not all the damage boost Team Plasma decks would play. These strategies were also using Hypnotoxic Laser and Burbank City Gym. Hypnotoxic Laser was an item card which poisoned your opponent's Pokemon guaranteed, and also put them to sleep if you flipped heads on a coin. When a Pokemon is poisoned, players put 1 damage counter in between turns. With Burbank City Gym in play, the damage from poison would increase by 2 damage counters. The combination of all these cards made it so that Frost Spear could deal upwards of 90 damage on the very first turn, all while dealing 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Dealing 90 damage on your first turn was incredible, as most Pokemon EX at the time had 180 HP or less. Not only did Frost Spear spread the damage onto bench Pokemon to set up future knockouts, it also threatened all 2-prize Pokemon with a 2-hit KO. Against decks that focus on evolving into powerful Pokemon or setting up evolution Pokemon for the utility like Electric, Frost Spear could even take 2 prize cards in a single turn. In the 2013 World Championship, Kyurem's strength led the Team Plasma strategy to being the most represented in the top 32, as well as appearing in the finals. Although the strategy would fall off going into 2014 standard metagame, it did have a single top 8 appearance at that tournament, although that player's build had moved away slightly from Kyurem. And at number 6, we have Genesect EX. With its Red Signal ability, whenever you attach a Plasma Energy from your hand to this card, you could switch your opponent's active Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon. Also for 2 grass and 1 colorless energy, Megalocannon dealt 100 damage to defending Pokemon and 20 damage to one of your opponent's bench. Compared to some of the other Pokemon in this video, the bench damage from Megalocannon wasn't as important to the card's success, but rather a small upside that had some practical applications. You see, Genesect EX was almost always paired alongside Virizion EX, with Emerald Slash attack dealing 50 damage and lets you attach 2 grass energies from your deck to one of your Pokemon. This attack could be used to power up all the grass energy needed to use Megalocannon, at which point the Genesect player could attach a Plasma energy and use Red Signal. This strategy was wildly successful during its standard format for a variety of reasons. Virizion EX provided easy and early setup with relevant chip damage, while making your Pokemon immune to status conditions with its Verdant to Wind ability. In a format filled with Hypnotoxic Laser, this immunity was invaluable. Red Signal was also easily the best ability of its time, especially since there were very few cards at the time which let you switch your opponent's active Pokemon. Genesect EX also got to use the G-Booster Ace Spec item, a tool card which gave Genesect the G-Booster attack, dealing 200 damage at the cost of discarding 2 energies attached to itself. The combination of these attributes made Genesect a very reliable deck which could disrupt your opponent and take massive one-hit KOs. Megalocannon's bench damage helps set up damage on Pokemon EX that could be KO'd later with 100 active damage. One common example of this would be in the mirror match. Virizion EX has 170 HP, so if you dealt 50 damage to one with an Emerald Slash, then 20 more with Megalocannon, that same Pokemon could be knocked out by Megalocannon later in the game. Megalocannon let Genesect EX set up KOs to multiple Pokemon at the same time, giving the card incredible offensive pressure once set up. This strategy dominated the 2014 standard metagame, with the deck making 5 of the top 8 decks of the 2014 World Championship, with the finals being a mirror match. Did you know that on June 8th, I'll be debuting my VTuber Corp to the world on Twitch? Link in the video description. Did you also know that Grimer from the Team Rocket set has an attack called Poison Gas that puts a Pokemon to sleep? But if you think that's a weird status condition for an attack called Poison Gas, that's because it was a mistranslation, as in its Japanese text, the attack Poison Gas does indeed inflict the poisoned condition. Make sure to follow Glitchstars on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch, links all in the video description. And at number 5, we have Sableye. For 1 Psychic Energy, Lost Mine lets you put 12 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon however you want, but can only be used if you have 10 or more cards in your Lost Zone. While it may seem difficult to get 10 cards into the Lost Zone, Comfey and Colressa's Experiment make doing so very easy. Much like all other bench damaging attacks, Lost Mine is excellent at knocking out lower HP Pokemon used to evolve or for their utility. Lost Mine also has a level of flexibility that very few other attackers have. Since you can choose how much damage Lost Mine can deal to an individual Pokemon, Sableye sets up chip damage to enable later KOs, all while taking knockouts on lower HP Pokemon. You can also use Lost Mine to knock out Pokemon with up to 120 HP. To exemplify Lost Mine's versatility, take some common situations in a mirror match between Lost Zone strategies. If your opponent has both Cramorant and Radiant Greninja, the first Lost Mine can deal 110 damage to Cramorant and 10 damage to Radiant Greninja. Then on the following turn, another Lost Mine can deal 120 damage to Radiant Greninja for a second KO. In another case, let's say your opponent has 3 Comfeys in play. With the first Lost Mine, you can deal 40 damage to each of your opponent's Comfeys. Then, with the second Lost Mine, you can deal 30 damage to each and take 3 prize cards while still having 3 leftover damage counters to put on other Pokemon however you like. It's also worth noting that since Lost Mine places damage counters directly on Pokemon rather than dealing a stated damage number, the attack gets around protective effects like Manaphy's Wave Veil ability that would otherwise stop damage from being dealt to bench Pokemon. Lost Zone decks are often built to use Lost Mine frequently due to how powerful the attack is. Since Sableye is a basic Pokemon and Lost Mine can be used for only a single energy, cards like Super Rod can put back into the deck multiple copies of either Sableye or Psychic Energy that had been knocked out on a previous turn. Sableye's reliability and flexibility makes it a dominant threat in the current standard format, with the card constantly doing well at competitive events, and even putting 3 Lost Zone decks in the top 8 of the 2023 World Championship. And at number 4, we have Garchomp C Lv.X. In case you don't know, a level X Pokemon is a special stage of Pokemon that can evolve from the card of the same name while it's in the active spot. Level X Pokemon can also use all Poke Powers, Poke Bodies, and attacks of the Pokemon underneath them. For example, Garchomp C Lv.X levels up from Garchomp C, and can still use a Claw Swipe and Earthquake attacks while leveled up. Although you usually don't do this due to how strong the level X attack is. For 3 colorless energy, Dragon Rush lets you discard 2 energies attached to this card to deal 80 damage to any of your opponent's Pokemon. It's worth noting that Dragon Rush would usually cost 2 colorless energy instead of 3 thanks to the cost reduction provided by tool cards like Energy Gain. Garchomp C Lv.X also has the Healing Breath Pokepower that fully heals all of your Pokemon SP when you level up into it. You can tell if a Pokemon is an SP Pokemon by the 2 letters on the left hand side of the card. From the very moment Garchomp C Lv.X was printed into the standard format of 2010, it became an instant tournament mainstay, alongside other strong SP Pokemon like Luxray G Lv.X and Dialga G Lv.X. Garchomp fits perfectly into the toolbox of powerful SP cards. In the initial standard format following the conclusion of the 2009 World Championship, Garchomp C Lv.X was an alternative attacker in SP decks that could pick off low HP bench Pokemon like Claydol for moderate investment. Usually you would attach necessary energy to Garchomp over multiple turns, although you could use Bronzong G's Galactic Switch to move already attached energy to Garchomp in order to set up Dragon Rush in a single turn. On the following turn, after leveling up and using Dragon Rush, using Poke-Turn allows you to put Garchomp C Lv.X and all cards attached to it back into your hand, letting you set up Healing Breath again. SP decks often use Dragon Rush to close out games, as many decks of the 2010 standard format relied on low HP Pokemon as part of the deck's main strategy or for consistency. Against SP decks, these Pokemon became sitting ducks that could be cashed in for prize cards by Dragon Rush at any point after they got benched. Later on in the 2010 standard format, Garchomp C Lv.X would get even better with the reprint of Double Colorless Energy. With Double Colorless Energy in the game, a player could power up Dragon Rush attack in a single turn with just 2 cards. Since Energy Gain reduced Dragon Rush cost to 2 colorless energy, one energy attachment could fulfill the entire attack cost. The printing of Double Colorless meant SP players could conserve more resources on the board and in their hand when using Dragon Rush, something the value-oriented SP decks greatly appreciated. With Double Colorless Energy, SP decks using Garchomp C Lv.X dominated the metagame, with a Luxray Garchomp SP toolbox winning the 2010 World Championship. And at number 3, we have Pikachu and Zekrom GX. This Tag Team GX Pokemon gave up 3 prize cards when knocked out, and has the appropriate power to go with that. For 3 electric energy, Full Blitz deals 150 damage, and lets you attach up to 3 electric energies from your deck to one of your Pokemon. Also, for 3 electric energy, Tag Bolt GX deals 200 damage to the defending Pokemon. If you had 3 extra electric energies attached to Pikachu and Zekrom GX when you use the attack, Tag Bolt GX also dealt 170 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Full Blitz constantly attaching electric energy from your deck meant that once Pikachu and Zekrom GX got off a single attack, the player would always have set up to continue dealing massive damage. Setting up the first Full Blitz was also made easy by the bevy of electric-type supporting trainer cards that existed during the 2019 to 2020 standard format. Electromagnetic Radar lets you search up to 2 electric-type Pokemon GX from your deck at the cost of 2 additional cards in your hand. Volkner lets you search for an item card of your choice alongside an electric energy card. This item card search could be used to get Stadium Nav, which searched out Thunder Mountain Prism Star. While Thunder Mountain Prism Star was in play, the attack cost of all electric-type Pokemon was reduced by 1 electric energy. When combined with the Tapu Koko Prism Star, whose ability lets you attach 1 electric energy to 2 of your bench Pokemon, you could use Full Blitz on the very first turn. If you knew your opponent couldn't knock out Pikachu and Zekrom GX during their turn, you could attach the 3 electric energy to the already active Pikachu and Zekrom and use the boosted Tag Bolt GX the next turn. While 170 damage fell short of one-hit KOing many 2 or 3 prize Pokemon, it would always be enough damage to KO Dedenne GX and almost all 1 prize Pokemon. With almost every deck in the format playing some number of Dedenne GX for its Dende Charge ability, having a one-use move that could KO it while also likely KOing the active Pokemon was highly valuable, and was a significant factor behind Pikachu and Zekrom GX's competitive success. At the 2019 World Championship, the deck put up fairly modest results, with only 1 player getting the deck in the top 8. Regardless, the strategy was a format powerhouse in 2020, and primed to have a fantastic year competitively. Sadly, the COVID-19 pandemic leading to the cancellation of all Pokemon events stopped the deck from having the competitive season it otherwise would have had. If a 2020 World Championship did happen, Pikachu and Zekrom would have been a very threatening presence, judging from its vast online success during the pandemic. And at number 2, we have Radiant Greninja. You can only use 1 Radiant Pokemon on your deck, and this card's power certainly reflects that. Once per turn, Radiant Greninja's Concealed Cards ability lets you discard 1 energy card from your hand to draw 2 cards. For 2 water and 1 colorless energy, Moonlight Shuriken deals 90 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon, but you have to discard 2 energy cards attached to it afterwards. When Radiant Greninja first released, it saw usage in a wide variety of decks for the extra draw power that Concealed Cards provided. There were very few decks that outright didn't want extra draw power, so Radiant Greninja was the best Radiant Pokemon you can play in almost all situations. Some strategies, like those built around Gardevoir EX and Flaffy, even wanted energy cards in the discard pile. Although the card could be used in nearly any deck, some of the best strategies in the standard format at the release of the video are ones which can take advantage of Moonlight Shuriken. With Radiant Greninja's release also came Origin Form Palkia V-Star, a card tailor-made to pair with it. Palkia V-Star had the Subspace Swell V-Star power. Once per game, Subspace Swell lets you attach up to 3 water energy cards in your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way you like. Not only does concealed cards put water energy into the discard pile, Moonlight Shuriken can also be powered up entirely by Subspace Swell. As early as the second turn, Palkia V-Star decks could use Moonlight Shuriken to knock out 2 of your opponent's low HP Pokemon. In a format filled with decks using Drizzile and pre-evolution Sobble, Moonlight Shuriken could reliably pick up 2 prize cards while setting your opponent's advantage engine massively behind. Early Moonlight Shurikens can be so oppressive to evolution decks that many players use Manaphy specifically to counter Radiant Greninja. Palkia V-Star isn't the only deck that can use Moonlight Shuriken to devastating effect. Lost Zone Toolbox decks make even better use of Greninja thanks to the item card Mirage Gate. If you have 7 or more cards in your Lost Zone, Mirage Gate has the effect to attach 2 basic energy cards of different types in your deck to one of your Pokemon. With the consistency in Lost Zone cards provided by Comfy and Colress's Experiment, the deck can very reliably set up early Moonlight Shurikens. In Chien-Pao EX decks, Baxcalibur's Super Cold ability allows you to attach as much water energy as needed to power Moonlight Shuriken in a single turn. In the current standard format, Radiant Greninja is one of the best possible cards to play against decks reliant on evolution Pokemon, all while boosting your own consistency. And for that, it gets this spot on this list. And rounding out this list as the best Pokemon that can damage your opponent's bench, we have Darkrai EX. This card was part of one of the most dominant decks in the Pokemon TCG's history, in part due to its capacity to damage bench Pokemon. For 2 Darkness and 1 Colorless Energy, Night Spear dealt 90 damage to defending Pokemon and 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Darkrai EX also had the Dark Cloak ability, which gave all your Pokemon with any Darkness energy attached to them a free retreat cost. While 30 damage may seem weak when it comes from a 3 energy cost attack, it rarely took 3 turns of attachments to use Night Spear. Thanks to Dark Patch and Junk Arm recycling it, it was possible to set up fast turn 2 or even turn 1 Night Spears. Night Spear gave Darkrai EX decks an easy means of setting up KOs for the late game with the bench damage, all while putting on immediate pressure to the active Pokemon with the 90 damage. Without factoring in any damage modifiers, Night Spear's 90 damage was enough to 2-hit KO every Pokemon in the format. Since you would always use Night Spear multiple times every game, stacking the 30 damage onto a single bench Pokemon EX meant it got lowered into KO range of Night Spear. Night Spear's bench damage also helped pick off already damaged Pokemon that switched out of the active spot after taking damage from an attack. Even just having dealt 30 damage had its own applications. If your opponent had a Mewtwo EX on the bench, dealing 30 damage to it with Night Spear meant it became a lot more risky to commit any energy cards to that Pokemon. Mewtwo EX has the X-Ball attack, which deals 20 damage for each energy card attached to both active Pokemon. Usually, players would attach double colorless energies to this card in order to make X-Ball deal 40 damage per energy attachment. Since Mewtwo EX has a Psychic-type weakness, if it ever attached a double colorless energy to it, your own Mewtwo EX could take a knockout on it. To really illustrate how strong the 30 extra damage from Night Spear could be in setting up game-winning situations, some players tried using Potion as a means to mitigate its spread damage. Potion is a card that had seen no serious competitive play before Darkrai EX, and hasn't seen any after the card warped an entire format around it. The item card even featured in the second place deck in the 2012 World Championship specifically to help combat Darkrai. Darkrai EX also had excellent utility while being one of the best offensive Pokemon the game had ever seen. Dark Cloak, giving your Pokemon a free retreat cost, meant you could switch to an undamaged attacker after surviving a hit. The card's Psychic-type resistance meant it took 20 less damage from every Mewtwo EX attack, a trait invaluable as Mewtwo was played in nearly all competitive decks. Its Dark typing gave Darkrai EX access to Dark Patch and made it partner well with Sableye, a card so strong it got banned from the expanded format. The only real downside to Darkrai EX was its Fighting-type weakness, which made it vulnerable to Terrakions' Retaliate attack, something that could be played around by setting up 2-hit KOs at the same time with Night Spear's bench damage. Darkrai EX was so dominant during the previously mentioned 2012 standard format that Darkrai decks made up over half of the top 32, something that hasn't happened before or since that event. Darkrai EX decks made up 7 of the top 8 decks at the event, eventually winning the whole thing where the top 4 were all mirror matches. The card is also the only one on this list to have won 2 World Championships, as the 2013 World Championship was won by Darkrai decks using Sableye. A single copy of Darkrai EX played in an Yveltal decks managed to make the top 8 of the 2014 World Championship. For being one of the most competitively successful cards in all the Pokemon TCG's history, Darkrai EX easily deserves the #1 spot on this list. Since dealing damage to your opponent's bench Pokemon is fundamentally powerful, it's easy to understand why so many Pokemon that could do it see success at the highest competitive levels of the Pokemon TCG. If you think your favorite bench damaging card didn't make it on this list, let us know down in the comments below.